We're going to go ahead and get started. Good morning. My name is Wendy Ramallo. I'm the Executive Director of the Council for Watershed Health. We are a nonprofit organization founded over 20 years ago to advance the health of our watersheds and the communities in them. And we do this through inclusive stakeholder engagement, education, and research. How many scientists do we have in the room today? How many engineers? How many lawyers? Community organizers? I brought this up because the council was started by a woman by the name of Dorothy Green. And she was not a scientist. She was not an engineer. She wasn't a lawyer. But she believed in the power of facts and evidence to change the quality of our water and the quality of the environments where we raise our children, where we go to school, where we thrive. And she did that in an extraordinary way. Not only did she start the Council for Watershed Health, but she founded Heal the Bay. Anybody hear of that organization? So she was a mom, just like me, just like Yvette, just an average citizen doing her job. She was also appointed to be on the commission of the LA Department of Water and Power Board of Commissioners. Very powerful board by Mayor Bradley. So I say that to inspire us in our dialogue today as we talk about water as an important issue for women's health and community health today, because I look around the room and I see women of power who can change the direction and the course of this county for decades to come. So we have a robust discussion today, and I'm going to try and move us along as quickly as possible while giving time for our extraordinary panelists here to share wisdom and experience, and then also for us to then move to a dialogue together about the priorities that we have and want to share with the larger group on water. And so our goal will be to come up with 3 priority areas in policy, advocacy, and research to improve water quality in Los Angeles County. And I want to set the context for this discussion a little bit here, because water is a big topic. It's a big topic, and the issues that infuse water policy are as diverse as this county. And so I'm hoping that as we have this dialogue and share ideas and strategies, successes and challenges, that we think about water on 3 scales. One is watershed, at a watershed scale for our drinking water supply, who we get our water from and how it gets here. The second is our rivers and streams for recreation. That's a different level of water quality, also impacting women's health. And then finally, at the neighborhood scale, again, a different lens for water. One that asks us to look at clean streets, flooding, our schools. What is the drinking water like at our schools and our churches and our homes? So again, it's a very large topic, but I think if we kind of put it in the context of the watershed, our rivers and streams, and then our neighborhoods, it'll help get the ideas flowing and think about what is it that we really need in each of those areas. So let's get this started, and I'd like to start by introducing our panelists. And Yvette, since you're to my right, why don't you go ahead and start? Tell us a little bit about you and what you're doing right now.
Okay, great. Can you guys hear me? Okay, great. I'm Yvette Martinez, and I'm the director of Our Water LA. It's a newly formed coalition that we formed this year to engage the public on water issues in Los Angeles County. And I wanted to start by saying I wanted to share this way of introducing myself, and because a friend of mine who is familiar with African communities said, in Africa, the Maasai tribe asks, when they meet somebody new, they say, they don't say, how are you, like we do. They say, how are the children? And I think that's a really good question to ask ourselves. How are the children in your community? How are they doing? Are they healthy? And it's a way to put in context what we're doing here, and that's building a new water future for the future of Los Angeles. what sort of legacy do we want to leave the children of LA in terms of water? And I believe that every Angelino, whether you live in North Hollywood or Northridge or Pacoima or Pomona or West Hollywood or Whittier, where I live, we all have the right to clean, safe, affordable water for drinking, for recreation, for our families, for our communities. And the way it is right now, it isn't really true. There's inequity in our water. Some people don't trust the water coming out of their tap. Why is that? Some women have to travel blocks to haul water from a fountain to their homes. Some people turn on the tap and pour it into their, fancy water dispensers, and they're good with that. It really depends on your zip code in Los Angeles, and we need to equalize that for our future. So that's what I'm here, and I'm here because we are forming a new coalition in LA County, and it's with environmental justice groups, environmental leaders, organizations, and we're building this coalition because there's going to be several things on the ballot next year having to do with water. A statewide vet bond on water, an LA County potential measure on water, and let's inform that. Let's participate. Let's have a dialogue about what we're talking about, and let's put ourselves at the table when these decisions are made on water policy. So we left some pamphlets in the back, and there's postcards, but I encourage you to go to our website, ourwaterla.org, and get involved, and we'd love to see you participate in our effort.
Okay. So hi, good morning everyone. My name is Yvette Lopez-Ledesma, and I'm the Deputy Director of a nonprofit called Pacoima Beautiful, and we're an environmental justice organization. How many people here know where Pacoima is? Okay, good. That's a lot more than in the room usually. So yes, Pacoima is in the northeast San Fernando Valley. We're at the foothills of the San Gabriel Mountains, and our organization has existed since 1996. It was formed by a group of mothers in the community who really wanted to ask the questions and get answers to why does our community look like this? Why do we have this polluting facility here? Why do our kids have breathing issues? What can we do about it? So they organized, and through community organizing, they brought attention to these issues. And in the past 21 years, the organization has done things from, work with the US EPA to get site remediation, create community benefits agreements, work on several initiatives to create education around diesel and other toxins in the community. We've also created policy through our Clean Up Green Up policy, and we've also done work around now. Water has been in our organization's, I guess you could say, portfolio for since its beginning. And now we're getting ready to break ground on actual physical projects that are meant to capture water. Pacoima in the native Fernandeño Tatavian language means a gateway to the rushing waters. So it's in our name, it's in our culture, it's in our community, it's embedded into everything that we do, into our name. So we work with community members of all ages, of all backgrounds. Our programming is free. We're based there in Pacoima, and we provide programming that is really based in popular education. So it's accessible to everyone in the community in multiple languages. And we really are there to work with the community and ensure that their concerns around water, air, housing, gentrification, whatever it may be, are heard, and action is taken. So that's kind of the role that we play. And we are also members of the Our Water Coalition. So Yvette here, we're going to go on a tour maybe at some point in time. So we support that, and being able to support stormwater capture projects that aren't only just happening in the more affluent parts of Los Angeles, but also happening in places like Pacoima, Boyle Heights, Wilmington, where South LA, where there are high levels of contaminants in our water. San Fernando Valley has the highest need for groundwater remediation, and so that's something that we should definitely talk about while we're here. But we also have issues around flooding and things that impede our quality of life. So when it rains, community members can't access the bus, they can't maybe go to school, it's hard to get, they're late to work, so what happens when you're late to work often? You might lose your job. So these are real issues that our community members face, and I'm glad to be here with you all to be able to share some of them.
Hi, my name is Felicia Federico. I am the Executive Director for the California Center for Sustainable Communities, and we're within the Institute of the Environment and Sustainability at UCLA. The founder and the director of the center is Stephanie Pincel, Professor Pincel, and the center's goal is to create actionable science that can improve the sustainability of urban systems. And so water and energy are two big research areas for us, and the work that we do really has a very strong social justice and equity perspective. Professor Pincel has a very long history in working in these areas, and that pretty much pervades really the questions that we ask that underlie the research that we do. I also work closely with another organization at UCLA in the campus-wide, which is the Sustainable LA Grand Challenge initiative, which is out of the Office of the Vice Chancellor for Research. And the Sustainable LA Grand Challenge has a goal of on issues of water, energy, and human health and ecosystems. That I'd encourage you to go to the website. It's a goal for 2050, and the idea of the initiative is to promote research that supports developing the pathway to achieve these targets. And so I'll be talking in one of the later sessions about working on an environmental report card with that organization for LA County that includes water issues.
Well, thank you, and thank you all three of you. And I do have to say I'm a very lucky lady because I get to work with both the vets on a weekly basis, I believe. And the council has supported a number of students from UCLA every summer, and this year they worked with us diligently on monitoring the quality of water in the LA River and produced an assessment framework for the LA Watershed. So these are hardworking women, and at every level, from science and data to community-based impact and advocacy. So on that note, maybe Yvette, you want to start talking about a little bit about one project that you're working on right now, and some of the challenges and successes that you're experiencing.
Okay, well, we are building this coalition, like I said, to bring the issue of water to the attention of the general public. And water is really complex. People don't understand, even the young people in my office. I said, we're working on water issues, this is so exciting. And they said, what's the problem? We have water, And we just had this huge amount of rain, so like, is the drought over? And no, it's not over. And we need to help people understand where our water comes from. And we need to help people understand that when it rains and we get inundated and flooded with water, that water just goes wasted into our watersheds and filthy into our oceans. And so we can do a better job of helping people understand and actually bringing this to the community. We're going to have organizers going out to the field in all parts of Los Angeles. We're training and getting ready for that. We have a website that we're hoping is user-friendly. We want to do fun infographics so that people understand where their water comes from, how they can conserve, and why this is such an urgent task at hand for our future. So I think people take for granted when we do have water, and then when we're in drought, people panic, but we can really actually think, be more forward thinking and do a better job planning and working with our communities. And so that's our challenge right now. We're putting together advocacy tools, communication pieces, and all of that, so that all this complex and data and research we can package up and get out and put the word out in our community. So that's our challenge, and that's why I'm so grateful to be here today and to talk to you about it, because I want your feedback. I want to know how we can better communicate to your communities, to students, to people who are actually, this is might be on the ballot next year, and what does that mean, and why is this urgent? And we had a parks measure, we had a transportation measure, and now the measures on water are headed our way. And so let's get out there in the community and let's bring this issue to the forefront and talk about it in a way that's accessible and real for people. And yeah, that's a huge challenge. So I need your ideas and I need your thoughts and feedback on that.
Yvette, since, and I don't know if many of you know, there's no better person to help bring together this diverse coalition and bring and infuse a lifetime of experience to advocacy than Yvette, who was a diligent soldier for a super senator Boxer for most of her career. So she's bringing that level of expertise and understanding of the politics down to how she can use that experience to help communicate the challenges in water. And maybe, Yvette, if you could talk a little bit about one of the projects that you're working on from a different perspective, one of the water projects that you're engaged in.
Sure. So I mentioned it briefly in my introduction. We're working on a green alley project. It's the first green alley project that we work on. And what a green alley is basically just an alley that has water features, that has greening features. And so we have worked over the past 5 years to really get a lot of community feedback on what community members want to see in terms of pedestrian safety, pedestrian amenities, what are the issues in the community that impede their mobility, and the flooding is a big issue. And one particular site that was identified was an alley that we call Bradley Alley, and it's adjacent to the San Fernando Gardens housing development. It's the largest public housing development in the San Fernando Valley. And so we created a plan called our Pacoima Urban Greening Vision Plan. And in this plan, through that process of creating that plan, it was really something that was a community-led effort where over the course of 50 outreach meetings, these sites were identified, and a lot of interest and a lot of support, prioritization was pointed at the Bradley Green Alley, so we decided to move forward with it. And through partnerships with foundations, the Liberty Health Foundation, LA Waterkeeper, LADWP, LA Sanitation, the Council for Watershed Health, we've been able to, in the Trust for Public Land, we've been able to secure funding to develop that alley into a place where not only is it going to be a safer pedestrian amenity for the neighborhood that is there and that needs it, but it's also going to be a place where there will be cisterns underground, and these cisterns will collect the water runoff, and will also take water from Van Nuys Boulevard, which is adjacent to it. And so it's really going to make an impact on the neighboring community there, and it's San Fernando Gardens, for those of you that aren't familiar with the public housing development, it's a community within the community. There's fences around it, they are treated, and they've been treated like they're less than, and and it's really, it's a shame, and it's kind of disgusting the way that's gone down. So, we see that area as very high need, and the community members are ready, and they've been engaged throughout this process, and they've really taken a lead on the design. They've already chosen. They want to see different. They want the fence to come down, and they want to replace that fence with trees, and they want to they have all these ideas for lighting, and they tell us about issues that we might not know because we're not there day after day. So that project is really exciting. It's something that we will be hopefully breaking ground on early next year, and we the challenge with that is that that's just one alley in a neighborhood where we've identified a network of over 12 alleys that could benefit from these types of projects. So the challenge being in the community and being that we're accountable to our community members is that they'll ask, well, so when's the next one? And it's this stuff takes time. So that's a challenge. But it's exciting that hopefully they'll get to see the benefits that will come from that. The agencies will see the benefits that come from that, from the process of planning that out in that way. with the community, and we'll be able to get more support to build out more of them and build out the network.
So very different projects, from large-scale advocacy to challenging and changing the built environment. And so Felicia, do you want to tell us about one of your projects?
Sure.
Some of the successes and challenges?
Sure.
Outside of funding, we all acknowledge that funding is always a problem and a challenge for all of us. Solidarity.
So, well, I'll talk about the data challenge. So one of the projects I've been working on for a number of years is an environmental report card. So back in 2015, out of the Institute of the Environment and Sustainability, we put out this environmental report card that covered all of LA County. You can find it online if you just go to 2015 UCLA 2015 environmental report card, and you can get access to the entire thing and to different pieces of it. And this covered all media and all kind of areas of the environment. So it had water, it had air, it had energy, it had hazardous waste, it had walkability, a variety of things. When the Sustainable LA Grand Challenge Initiative really started ramping up, that I mentioned a few minutes ago, we decided that we would reissue these report cards on a maybe annual or semi-annual basis, because that was always the plan, right? These report cards tell you what's going on now, what the trends have been in the past, 5 or 10 years, and then ideally, we were selecting indicators where you could get data each year to keep it updated and see where things are going. And so we decided that we would redo these report cards with a specific focus on these 3 areas of the Sustainable LA Grand Challenge. So we just issued one on energy and air quality, so if you want to look for that, you can look for 2017 environmental report card from UCLA. And we're currently putting together one that exclusively focuses on water, so all different aspects of water. And one of the big problems is the complexity of the data, and sort of a frustration about things that aren't, I don't think, adequately regulated. So I'll just give one brief example. There's a contaminant in groundwater called dioxane, or 1,4-dioxane. And if you go to the Regional Water Board site and you take a look at it, you find out that there's no state or federal regulatory standard for it, or maximum contaminant level. But there is information known on cancer risk. And there are a number of wells that are being monitored, but it's not really clear why those wells were selected, because there's no regulation in the state of California that requires monitoring for this chemical in drinking water. There are some drinking water systems that are monitoring, but others that are not. And of the wells that are being monitored, there's a pretty high percentage, like around 30 to 35% of them, where we're getting hits above a sort of a trigger or a notification threshold. And it's been 20 years since this contaminant first showed up in drinking water aquifers, and yet there's still this kind of big gap in the regulation. So I would identify some lack of adequate regulation and also lack of access to data, which I think is maybe the next topic we're going to talk about, so I'll save some of those comments.
Perfect segue. So this is a critical issue across the board, and one of the things we wanted to do in our comments and in our dialogue is make sure that we impart resources and tools to all of you, and you share with us as well, so that you walk out of here with something extra, something that you didn't have before. And I very much appreciate every time it's mentioned how complex water is, the issue of water, what kind of water we're talking about, who delivers it. How many of you know who delivers your water? How many of you pay your water bill? All right, well, there's a good place to start. But all joking aside, in LA County, you have well over 90 water purveyors. I lost track last night counting. I was getting a little too tired, and by the time I got to 95, I figured I'd stop. If you live in the city of Los Angeles, which represents 4 million people, you're lucky enough to have one water purveyor. Yay us. That significantly reduces the complexity on figuring out who is accountable for getting the water to your home. But all water providers are required by state law to post annual water quality reports on their website, and you are also entitled to those by law upon request. So we don't force them for environmental reasons to mail 4 million residents water quality reports, but if you pick up the phone and call them, they will provide it to you. It's available in multiple languages, and in the city of Los Angeles, I think they produce it in 13 different languages. So getting to that issue of data and the importance of it, that is a tool available to you, which most people don't know that they have, that can be an important part of your advocacy. But as Felicia mentions, it's only as good as the contaminants that are being regulated in it, and sometimes there are gaps. So on that note, I would like to go back to you and discuss this issue of data, because we work together, obviously as a behemoth academic institution, they are data rich. The council is a little bit in the in-between space as a community bridge, and we have our own challenges accessing data. And as we started out saying, your advocacy is only as good as your facts, right? And so there are challenges in getting to this, and what have you experienced, and where do you think that there are some areas for growth?
Yeah, so just to kind of give you a sense for how problematic it is, so since 2013, when we were working on this first report card, I've been advising teams of current students, usually seniors in the environmental sciences degree program, and then also some recent graduates. And this has been a problem for us. And so if it's a problem for that group of students, and with me and some other folks as advisors, then that the chances of somebody without really a background in these issues or without an understanding of the science, it's going to be really tough. Or just an average person who's wants to spend their evening trying to take a look at what's going on in their neighborhood. It would be almost impossible to understand what's going on. And so because I could talk about this all day, I just put down some bullet points that I'll just cover here, and then let the other folks talk. So the first problem is that there's a very complex set of regulatory requirements. And all of this data gathering is gathered around these specific requirements. And this data is then put into databases that can be very old. And there's been a lot of developments, as you can imagine, in data management, various applications and tools for making data available and connecting different pieces of the data to each other, so you can get a whole picture with context, and you can understand the relationships between different aspects of the data. And this really hasn't been happening on the regulatory side. I just don't see that there's been money spent to upgrade these databases to make it easier to access the information. There's also, over the last number of years, has been a big transition from paper reporting to electronic reporting, and so there's been some gaps where some regulator might have a stack of papers on their desk that they haven't input yet. Just the data sets themselves, if you're looking at county-wide data, they're just large and very complicated with all the different aspects of information that are being recorded. And then the other important thing is that there is a time lag between when data is collected and when it's uploaded into the system. So there's a specific time lag, on a sort of a day-to-day, week-to-week, year-to-year time lag. But there's also the last thing I'll say is there's a huge time lag. We just found out that the water quality information about whether our rivers and streams are in compliance or meeting their water quality standards, that's just coming out now and being approved. So we're in close to fall of 2017, right? Well, the data that's being used is from 2010. And so that's the data collection for the 303D list. Yeah.
I feel like a high achiever, because we just finished our 2015 river report and got that data in. So
So statewide or across LA County, what's coming out now and just being approved is based on 2010 data. So it's 7 years old. Mm-hmm. So how do you keep track of what's going on when your data is that old? So those are some of the issues. I'll let you guys go.
Yvette, if you could maybe speak to, I know, because Felicia brought up the issue of the money not being spent to upgrade these systems, and I have to validate that assertion, because we work frequently with the state board, and they may sometimes have 1 or 2 people in a unit that is collecting this data that we're being required to report, and there's no staff. There's just no staff. And so when we think about our advocacy and legislative priorities, maybe we should put that in the, just put a pin in it, because if we can't get that information, then, how are we going to effectuate good policies that are relevant and meaningful and impactful? But that's one dynamic of working with our regulators and the agencies that provide our water. Maybe, Yvette, you could talk a little different perspective about working on the ground with these agencies, and specifically the water providers like LADWP or LASAN that I know you work with so frequently. What we're often perceived to be in conflict, and I know that that's not necessarily your experience, so maybe you could speak to that a little bit.
I mean, we all have our disagreements, right? But, in order to do this work and do it successfully, you do engage in some conversations that might start off awkward or might start off uncomfortable, or, but we can't let our own personal views or whatever get in the way of the community getting the resources that it needs. And so we've worked with DWP, we worked with LASAN, we worked with LA Water, that's a nonprofit, LA Water, but we've worked with the state board. And I've seen that issue of there not being, we like to do education instead of, coming down with fines. That's what we prefer, unless it's, something super severe. I mean, it's case by case, right? But we understand that a lot of the facilities in Pacoima that might be contributing to the pollution of water runoff, they might just not have the education they need to be able to do the right thing. So we have gone on visits with the regulators to provide that education, to ensure that instead of them getting a fine, that they're getting a warning, and that they have time to fix the issue. And so we've seen one of our favorite friends from the water board just retired, so now they're down to 1 person in that unit, and it makes it really hard when you really want to do the right thing and reach out to the businesses and ensure that they have the education that they need to be able to play by the rules, quote unquote. And then with LADWP, we've done a ton of education. We still do a lot of education around where do we get our water from, to different projects that are happening in the neighborhood. Understanding, people's bills. That's where it all starts. We really want people to understand what they're getting charged for, and to not be afraid to ask the questions that they need to ask. And if they don't feel comfortable asking them, then we are a resource and we can ask for them. But really working with DWP to ensure that they know that we're not all scientists or water wonks in the neighborhood, that they really need to come to the community and engage in a conversation and dialogue about, what is it that they do, that they're more than just the people that send us a bill, but they really can be a resource. With LA Sanitation, same idea, we've done a ton of outreach with them, and they've been very supportive in the development of our projects, our green alleys and things like that. So it's a relationship like any other. You have to nurture it, and you have to be able to have difficult conversations when you have to have them. And I think at the end of the day, they want to do good work. Their approach may not have been in certain places and certain times not have been the best, but that's what we're there to do. We're there to remind them that at the end of the day, they're an agency, a public agency that is there to serve the needs of the community, and whatever we can do to make sure we keep pushing that message, and then that's what we do.
Thank you. Yvette, since we have your wisdom and years of expertise in effective advocacy, what are some of the specific ways that we can empower women to advocate in this space? I know that looking around the room, I don't think we need an invitation. We're at the table, and we're ready to lead the solutions. But I really appreciate your insight.
Yeah, I see women at the table a lot as the doers and the implementers. but then I don't see women who are the department heads and who are sort of the big cheese leaders of these infrastructure issues. And I feel like we need to grow leadership for women on the issue of water. I'm sure you all follow the huge flooding and massive destruction in the city of Houston. And I saw the mayor step up and say, you know, we could have avoided a lot of this had we invested in the infrastructure of our city. And that is where we are today. We don't have anything like that we know of headed our way, but if we think ahead and plan a little bit better and think about our infrastructure, and our old ways of doing things just will not withstand the impacts of climate change anymore. And I think women are the best messengers for that. We are the caretakers and the teachers in our communities and the leaders of our families. We're the ones who are hauling water across, you know, on buses to get to our families. So we need to, I think, grow the next generation of water leaders. Let's make sure the next department head is a woman, because I just see us doing all the work. But we're not really the ones who are with the vision, who are, you know, leading the change for infrastructure. So that's what I see. I think with all this talk about water, you know, the statewide water bond, the county measure, all this happening, we have an opportunity to lead this conversation on water. And so let's make sure we're there. Let's make sure that different parts of LA County are represented. So, you know, there are parts of LA County where children have never even been to the beach. And so when we talk about water quality and beach, let's think about, well, who's missing from this conversation? It is not right that some communities get flooded out and those kids aren't able to go to school because parents don't want to cross the street through the flood, don't want to go to work. That is just not, I mean, this is LA. We shouldn't have that inequity. I hear about those things and I get so upset, and I feel like that's why I'm here to help communicate these problems and bring them to the attention to the community and in the most accessible ways. Because if you're not reading your water bill and understanding where your water comes from and just paying it, that's not really being an advocate for you're just sort of like, you know, being passive. And let's not be passive. Let's be more active, and let's hold these water companies accountable, and let's look at our bills and see what we're paying for. Because when things go wrong, we're going to blame someone. So we have the opportunity now to think ahead and think about our future. And I think that's really why I'm here, because I'd like to engage and figure out how we can communicate the lack of research, the lack of projects in our communities, and yeah, so you guys are going to help me do that.
So I think we've been having a good discussion, and we're a little slow on time here. So I think what I'd like to do is now open this up to everyone so we can start having a dialogue and a conversation. And again, focus back on, we're going to represent water in the next discussion. And we really want to focus on 3 priorities: policy, research, and advocacy to help improve water quality in LA County. And so I'd like to open that up right now for some questions and dialogue and recommendations from the group. So please don't be shy, raise your hand. You know, based on what you heard today, any questions that can help stimulate this discussion that you might have from what some of the panelists have had to say? Stand up. Could you say your name and who you're representing today?
Sure. I'm Ella Ortega. I'm with USC, and I'm a dual degree candidate in social work and public health. And my question pertains more to both the vets. I very much appreciate when we talk about advocacy and how your push is really for women to be in leadership positions. But on the other hand, I'm hearing from Yvette that when it comes to public health job positions, they are very limited. You mentioned that there was only one individual in the job position needed within water. So my question for the two of you, I guess, or for all of you, really pertains to for us as women and as men as well, because I see we have quite a few of them, is how can we as young individuals or even residents within this field expand this job market so that way we really can, as women leaders, or come into those positions of leadership. Because I think that if the job market is a little bit more sparse in our field, how do we open that up so that way when leadership positions do arrive, we have the experience and the know-how to really be effective in those positions?
Yeah. I mean, so a lot of things, like I could spend like an hour talking about this, but I think that, you know, for me, personally, I could share my story, a little bit of getting to Pacoima Beautiful, but even before being at Pacoima Beautiful, my job, I've been in nonprofit for 18 years now, and it always was, water was always in the conversations at the other agencies that I was in. Maybe it just wasn't a position that was like heavily, like its focus was on water, but what I've seen in those last 18 years is that the conversation now is going towards water. And for lots of nonprofits, public agencies, the work around water is really expanding. And I think that there will be more opportunities. I always tell you know, students, I work with students at CSUN and mentor some students there, and always tell them, you know, of course, internships, whether it be with the water, you know, LADWP or LASAN, so that you learn that side of it, but also just being in your neighborhood and talking to community members and your neighbors and about issues around water. I mean, these issues are not new. We don't have to reinvent the wheel when we're talking about water and how to, you know, how do we address the issues, because a lot of people in our communities come from places where they don't rely on where they don't have a reliable source of water, and they've been carrying the water, like, you know, Yvette mentioned, and, you know, they know about these issues, and you can do things like community organizing. To me, that's everything. If you can mobilize with a community to draw attention to the issues that are around water, and maybe if you want to be the link between, you know, the community members and the public agency, you just created a job for yourself there. And it'll be a very a job for the long haul, because there's a lot of work to do around it. But, you know, there's the typical things like the internships, like I said, you know, going through your school, and maybe there's a program at USC that's really focused on that. I know at USC you have folks like Manuel Pastor and that department at Peer that are really focused on environmental justice issues. And they do talk about water and you know, air quality. You know, places like Occidental, they great programs out there on policy, environmental policy programs. It just really is about what you see yourself doing. Do you see yourself in a more, you know, academic place? Do you see yourself at a public agency with going through the bureaucracy of things? You know, it really is. There are some things out there. The state water board, I think it's complicated. You know, state agencies, they rely on state funding, and so, you know, we mentioned advocacy and pushing for more positions to be created at the state level. That's really important. That is key, because if we don't have those folks in those jobs, you know, unfortunately, a lot of the work that we do does rely on the partnership with them to be able to get out there and, you know, be on the ground with them so that they can see what we've been seeing, and we can make that change at that level. So we, you know, I don't know, maybe I said too much, but those are my ideas.
And for me, I think networking is really key. I am out pretty much every night at some event having to do with water and the environment, and the weekends too. That's really how to get yourself out there. There's Heal the Bay just had a massive beach cleanup over the weekend. I saw Girl Scouts, and I saw Boy Scouts, and I saw community groups picking up trash all over the beaches in our area. There's river cleanups. There is the bike, community. Wendy has a great fundraiser coming up for the Council for Watershed Health. You can volunteer there and meet people who work at DWP. City of LA has workshops all the time where you could meet people who are leaders in this industry and really network that way. For me, networking is just when I mentor young people and students and college graduates, it's really about that. Physicians for Social Responsibility, they have, you can find an event every night having to do with the environment and connect with the right people and get out there, so.
If I could, as an employer, I have I believe, and as a woman, I believe I have a special responsibility. If the glass ceiling is there for most fields, in engineering and science, which is where all these agencies promote their managers and directors, why I think LADWP was one of the first, with Marcy Edwards, to have a female GM. And she earned that. She started in that department at 19 years old. And I don't believe that standard is that high for other folks. But the issue of water equity for me begins with education. I take an intentional step to broaden the reach of the internships that I provide so that women and students of color that come from backgrounds that do not have the economic resources to have fancy internships are given the tools in my nonprofit. And I think all of us in our space, and I know that the relationship we have with UCLA, we appreciate so deeply because we'll just give me those students. And they can get hands-on project experience out in the field learning the science. So I think it really is our responsibility to take those steps and put women in those decision-making positions and get them the education they need to do that.
I would just add one more thing, and I can't remember who, just recently somebody had a very interesting map showing this, but so much of the money that comes to pay for all these positions that everybody's talking about comes through grant monies, bond, you've heard of probably cap and trade, it's across a lot of different, air, water, and all. But the problem is that this funding originates in Sacramento, and there's also a lot of philanthropic organizations up in the Bay Area. Not enough is coming down to Los Angeles, and definitely not proportional to the population and the GDP concentration here in Southern California. So I think advocating through your elected officials to ensure that enough money is coming here will help to raise the bar and increase the overall number of jobs in this area. Because that's what's going to fund the research projects, that's what's going to fund all of these different nonprofit organizations, and that's how they're going to get the money to create those jobs. Yeah.
So two things. One, that there's often a pipeline through our nonprofit organizations. I'm Pacoima with Physicians for Social Responsibility. But I will say something to the MPHs out there. We wanted to hire an MPH, and not a single applicant that came through could answer one question adequately. What's environmental justice? And and other times that's a question that stumps every single person we've ever interviewed, even folks who work within the field. Yes. So which is really fascinating. And we ended up hiring someone anyway, and she's now working at Cali, PA. Her first week, she goes, "I know I messed up that question," but it's just so we have to do a better job of educating folks and folks coming out of the university understanding what it means to have a justice lens to the work. And it would make our jobs of training folks and deploying them a lot easier.
Can I make a comment on that? You're up 100%. We ask that question. And everybody that comes through the door for an interview, we ask that question. I've heard so many answers to what is environmental justice. And sometimes they're 1 minute long, and that's fine. Sometimes they're like 10 minutes long. But it's really important that we ask the question and that you know the answer if you're interested in being in this field, because you have to have that equity lens. You have to have that on at all times. because if not, it's just not gonna work.
Yes, so I have a question, and it might actually even merge into a policy or advocacy priority, we'll see. But that is, with regard to the potential ballot measure to go before LA County voters to provide major financing for water modernization and greening of our infrastructure, in addition to the public education campaign that you talked about, Yvette Martinez, is there also a plan for community engagement? So in other words, really getting the feedback and the opinions of residents around what kinds of potential projects they might see in their community and what other kinds of benefits might come from water infrastructure. So,
Yeah,
question.
and what is your name? And
Oh, I'm sorry, I'm Michelle Pritchard with the Liberty Hill Foundation.
Okay, great. Yeah, so there's parallel efforts. So there's a coalition that was formed this year to really put pressure on LA County and to make their plans better. And that's what our coalition is formed around. Environmental groups. We have people doing reports on equity, on jobs, all the things that we want to see coming out of this measure. And then we have LA County. We have the Board of Soups that are writing this measure and thinking about it and putting everything together around it. They are going to be putting together like a 20-person advisory council and committee that should be reflective of the entire county together. They'll be meeting on a regular basis. I don't know who they are yet, but I know that they're forming that. They are also going to be engaging the community and having workshops and trainings throughout the county over the next year. So you'll be seeing that come to fruition in the coming months. Supervisor Kuehl's office and Supervisor Solis are leading that effort. And so we're monitoring very closely. We're going to make sure that the right people are on that advisory committee. We're going to make sure that they're going to the communities and going to the neighborhoods that need to have these discussions, that the people have the tools that are accessible and in Spanish and whatever languages we need to understand this. So yeah, there's two parallel tracks, and we meet with LA County on a regular basis. We bother them, we bug them. We want to make sure this goes right, and so we're like my position is being funded by the Water Foundation and some other environmental groups, but we're trying to raise more money so that we can hire organizers on our side to go out in the community and work closely with the faith-based community and with environmental justice groups, and that so that we have tools. We have an awesome website that Anais here on our staff helped build, and open to, we'd like to build a toolkit and anything that we can do to help bring more awareness to this issue.
Can I ask a question in the audience? How many of you in your employment or with groups that you're associated with, how many of you think about water as a mechanism, as kind of the backbone on improving equity in your community? So we got a lot of work to do.
I know.
Because I think as we're kind of reflecting on the topic that we're here for today on women's health, and going back to the comments that were made earlier about the lens and reshaping that lens, water is a tool. I mean, billions of dollars are brought down to LA County to help build up our infrastructure and improve our infrastructure. And that can be done in a silo, or it can be done in coordination to meet other needs. One of the things that we work on is making sure that that message resonates with the actual community members based on their priorities, what Yvette was talking about: safety, access to parks, safe drinking water. These are the things that concern most people in their daily business. So yes.
I do want to say, I think myself, LA County and Karen McIver, I think myself and my partner Jennifer, we are aware of that, because we, as health educators, we promote that in our clinics, especially in our reproductive health, the women's clinic, the prenatal clinic, our adult primary clinic, all of our clinics, because our patients are very low income and they don't know the importance of drinking water. And we talk to them about health issues and healthy living. We talk to them about bringing water to their appointments and how much water to drink and the importance of having their children drink water versus juice and a lot of sugary drinks. So I think we are aware, but this brings it to a different height of the awareness of where your water comes from at our level to be more of an educator. My grandparents are 52 years Pacoimians, and we moved them from Pacoima because of this situation. And my grandfather, I think it's important that if you do something, talk to the older generation in that community so that they can teach the younger generation that's left there, because a lot of the older generation have left because of how the community has fallen. And it's sad because my grandfather was one of those that used to love to sit on his patio and just enjoy the community, and he got to a point where he didn't want to even go outside. So we moved him because the community just got really bad, the water had changed, the environment, no one took care of their lawns anymore, and it just wasn't a safe environment anymore. So 52 years, my grandparents we moved him to Antelope Valley, not much better, sorry, I lived there, but, and it was a culture shock for them. They'd much rather have lived there and had their last days there, because that's where they bought their first home and lived there for 52 years. So I think it's important that you get in the community and try to encourage the older seniors to educate this new generation, because they know about clean water. They know about environmental, inequities, and they know when Pacoima first came, and my grandparents were the first people to buy their house on that property on Fillmore and Jonesfield. So they knew about what that should look like. So I do think it's important that you go into the older communities and see if you can get them to talk to that younger generation about what the environment should look like and how to preserve that, because I don't know if this generation knows how to educate their children on that level. And I don't know if we know the importance of our older generation educating this generation, and that importance of it starting in the home, because we think, oh, grandparents, but there's a lot of education that can be done in the home with your grandparents, especially if 52 years lived there. So that's all.
Well, this is community-based research. This is history, these are facts, these are important. Your strategies now are only going to be better infused with the facts from what happened. I can imagine the families and the grandparents in the Boyle Heights community and those impacted by Exide had some interesting facts to impart on what they knew about their community. So when we talk about the importance of research and data, it's not just at the academic institution level, it's also in the strategies that we engage in the community. So thank you, it's a very powerful recommendation.
Yeah, I think change is really hard. I mean, I had to tell my parents, you can't water your lawns anymore. Let's landscape the front yard. I want my parents to stay in Whittier. I don't want them to leave. We can't have those plants anymore. It's just not right. This is a different time in our lives. And I've also had to tell my parents, no more plastic water bottles at any of our backyard parties. We do not need to buy that water from Costco in the plastic water bottles. Let's put water in the jugs, and how did we become so wasteful and take for granted all of our resources? So now we're in this situation where we've got to take care of our planet for the future generation. We can't be wasteful like that. We can't just I see people in my neighborhood watering their lawns and broken stuff. I'm just like, what are you doing? It's so wasteful. So I think change is really hard, and it's incumbent upon us to change our ways and learn from our grandparents. My grandparents were not wasteful people at all. My grandmother saved every bit. She was the best recycler out there. So yeah, just, I don't know if you have any ideas on working in Pacoima.
So many. I appreciate you sharing your story about your grandparents. Thank you for that. We do, being funded by mothers and working with community members, we have adult community member groups, and, they will be the ones to tell us that we don't need to reinvent the wheel. We have had solutions, community-based solutions, for a very long time. When it comes to data, the way that we collect data, has been called ground truthing. It's ground truthing. That's data collection. That's valuable information that can help shape policy, can help shape decisions. And really, there's still a lot of data that's not being captured. because it starts in the data collection method, right? So we know that if, you know, we can't necessarily get accurate rates for our community on, you know, something like a waterborne illness, because a lot of people, you know, we have undocumented people who may not be insured and who may be afraid to go to the doctor. We may have people that may be documented but don't want to see a doctor here and would rather go across the border. We know that, you know, a lot of people still see a lot of natural, like, healers, and they prefer not to go through any sort of like Western medicine. So a lot of this information isn't being captured, and so, you know, we're left out. And, you know, to speak on, you know, just the planning and, you know, I think we had talked a little bit about Harvey on our call in prep, but, you know, these floods and these, you know, events, they are going to keep happening, and they're going to keep getting stronger. And we're not planning for climate adaptation. We're not planning for mitigation. And unfortunately, the investments to be ready for that sort of event, you know, they still, the event itself may not discriminate, but the impacts do, because the communities that haven't been invested in for the infrastructure are usually Black and brown communities, where, you know, they're low-lying communities that flood, and then what ends up, you know, resulting is that people are displaced, there's fatalities, job losses, lives change. You have people that left from New Orleans, from, you know, Katrina, went to Houston, and now they got to Houston, and now the same thing happened to them again. So, you know, when it comes to planning and being, you know, getting involved in the advocacy side and pushing for these investments, if we're not pushing for these investments to go into our communities of color, and, you know, we're never going to win. So we need to be strong and have that equity lens that we mentioned earlier.
How many of you have heard the term water resiliency kicked around? So much more education. To make a long story short, or a long word meaningful, what Yvette just described really is about the resiliency of the community, where it has been paved over, where our engineering feats have given us concrete. They have now made us vulnerable to the impacts of climate change. In places like Houston, it's more, the impacts are more severe because they did have grotesque planning. Basically, just a flat flooding field. But here, I think that what you said that resonated so deeply was, while the events don't discriminate, the impacts do. Because where are the communities more paved over? Where are the communities concrete? When we invest what they are advocating for in more projects that green your neighborhood and use Mother Nature to dilute the pollutants that run off from our cars, our streets, into the river, they have the ability to buffer climate change. And so we engineer to those big events through greener engineering, not more pavement. So that's a very powerful statement. The impacts do discriminate.
So one of the beauties of this conference is that there are people that work in many different fields. So there's, how many are health educators in the room? How many of you work for public health departments? So, you know, we often don't talk, right, with those of us in the environmental health and justice community. So one of the biggest problems, among the many, is lack of data, right? So there's many diseases that are unreportable. The birth defects registry program is now not working, and so a lot of the data that we collect to look at community vulnerability that would help us in our advocacy doesn't exist. So, I mean, and out of one of these conferences before came a collaboration in terms of data collection that helped look at women's health outcomes related to air pollution. So, I mean, we hope that we can establish long-term relationships around getting better data at the community level about health status, right? So that informs our policy. But the other part is, you know, this interchange between the agencies and health educators. I'm a health educator, so I love the fact that we do everything, right? Advocate, educate, and policy work. So how do we do that with folks so that we're actually doing it right? Because we know how education doesn't work, but the water education is really critically important. right? Folks aren't looking at their water quality reports. There's a lack of looking upstream, like if these chemicals are, and there's another intersection for those of us who work on toxics, like let's move upstream, let's stop poisoning a really valuable resource, right? And what are the chemicals that the pesticides and other things, right? So we hope that some of these ideas really start to weave our different work together in a tighter way.
Good morning. Good afternoon. I'd like to know how the Watershed Health Agency is working with the African American community. This morning, hearing the keynote speaker talk about the astonishing statistics of the mortality rates of African American women and the children infant mortality rates. How are you reaching out to that community? How are your publications being distributed? How is representation in your agencies? All three of you, your agencies and the Watershed Health Committee. And if you're not working with the African American church in the communities, they still have a very strong hold on the community. They all have health committees. This information needs to be delivered there. So if you could address that for me, please.
Well, from the Council for Watershed Health, my first day on the job was at a big old conference like this in Southgate with lots of elected officials and agency heads and heads of organizations. And the elected officials were encouraging everyone to talk about these issues. So this is almost 2 years ago. And they're like, if we don't get out there and we don't start talking about the intersection between water quality and community health, if we don't get out there and we don't start talking about the intersection of water projects and community safety, we're going to have a lot of problems come the time when folks need to vote us back into office and we're asking them to vote for more money. And I looked around the room and I saw no one like me. I saw no one working in the community, and I said, well, the first thing you need to do is start talking to people. So I can tell you very specifically on our end, one of the first things we did was broaden the dialogue. And we instituted a program supported by LADWP and LASAN, working together with Pacoima Beautiful, Lot to Spot, and going beyond the traditional nonprofits, so looking to our health-based organizations, partnering with Day One out in El Monte, and taking this dialogue directly to the communities, taking it to the Watts Community Garden. So building the partnership base. It was the first action item I saw, so you're spot on. This dialogue has to be brought out and engaged, and Water has done a poor job of that, not for always the wrong reasons. Water decisions, infrastructure decisions are made largely based on where water can be kept safely, right? So Pacoima, they're sitting on top of the largest aquifer. We can get water into the ground there. It benefits not only Pacoima, but also the residents of South LA. Our water investments in South LA need to be different because there's ground contamination there. And so, nevertheless, we can invest in green alleys, and we can invest in more park space to help dilute the pollution. So the dialogue, the challenge is expanding that dialogue. But on our end, we specifically noted that as a priority, and we decided we're going to expand this dialogue to include more communities.
Well, for the Our Water Coalition, we are just starting to put out the word that we're going to have organizers on the ground, and one of our key areas is Mark Ridley Thomas's supervisorial district. So we just started conversations with some of the community groups, Community Coalition and Scope, and so we're going to be meeting at the end of the month, and we know we need to do a better job of bringing in the African American community, the Asian Pacific Islander community. All parts of Los Angeles really need to be in this conversation. And I am well aware of that, and thank you for reminding us. And like I said, there's just so much diversity in this county, and if we don't have everybody at the table, we're not going to be able to do this. So we need you, and I realize that.
And, you know, we engage community members, African American community. We do door-to-door outreach. You know, Pacoima is historically a Black community. It was created because of, you know, redlining. And so we work with community members of all ages. In our youth program, we have Black African American youth. Our adult members, we reach out, you know, we work with them. We work with Reverend Broadus in our neighborhood. So, you know, the senior center, we engage, you know, at that level, at the grassroots level.
And one of the things that we're trying to do on the report card is, with the resources we have, is to, for as many indicators as possible, is to map them so that you can see the geographic distribution and the differential impacts, or the differential values of whatever it is that we're looking at. In other work that we do at the center, which is specific examples are really more around energy, but we're getting down to being able to map things really at the census tract level and connecting the information we've got with all the demographics from the census. And I think a big part of the question that was brought up for interviewees, I can't remember who said it, I think a big part of the social equity or environmental justice approach is asking the right questions, asking the questions in a way that allow you to reveal these differences in impacts and benefits of whatever it is that you're looking at. So that's a really important slice that we're trying to implement throughout all this research work.
I have the mic here. Hi, my name is Maribel Castillon. I am a public health nurse with the Department of Public Health, and I work for the Child Health and Disability Prevention Program. So one of the things that I chose to do is bring back a lot of the information that I've learned and introduce it to my colleagues and my supervisor. And sometimes within the county, you know, people get used to doing their work a certain way, and you know, it was a challenge in the beginning, but, you know, educating them about why it's important for us to be involved and know about this and speak to other nurses, public health nurses, and connect the dots. Because if we are advocating for public health, you know, we're all about prevention. We have to start from where the source begins. You know, so that requires a openness and change of mind and like-minded people, unfortunately, because there's some people who just don't understand or don't want to get involved at this time. Another thing too that I did, I went to my labor, and I looked to see what they were doing. And at the time, the issue was not really being addressed. So I got together with the like-minded person, and we created our first environmental justice action team. So now labor is involved. And the reason I felt that that was important is because we are involved with policy. You know, we choose or we endorse a lot of the politicians that are up in the state or federal level. So, you know, I felt that it was important for us to use our voice and say, listen, if we're going to support you, we want to make sure to know that you are, you know, with the people and are going to address some of these issues. And I'm grateful that we have Senator De Leon, you know, who's an activist, and it's great to be involved in that. And, you know, this, I feel, even though it could be a challenge right now, this is an opportunity for a lot of us right now, and it's important for us to think out of the box, you know, and just take advantage of all the great opportunities available at this time. Thank you.
We're running very short on time, and that's always happens because there's so much good input. If there are other priorities and other areas that you want us to focus on and make sure that we include in these notes, please just take one of the notepads and jot those down, and we will include those in our scribing of our priorities and where we should be looking at for policy research and advocacy. One more question? Quick?
When you were talking about infrastructure, and I live within the LADWP region, the pipes haven't been replaced in 100 years. Every couple of months we hear pipe burst, streets are flooded, 20 million gallons of water was wasted. There's no money being put in. DWP is the highest paid utility, the employees are the highest paid utility in the nation, and they just got approved for a massive raise. And there's a surplus. Our bills have gone up almost double, I would say, in the last 5 years or so. It's been a huge increase. And the money, there's a surplus every year. DWP runs a surplus, and they have an agreement with the city council and the mayor. The money goes to the LA City General Fund, so there's no motivation for the city council members or the mayor to do anything about that, and that money shouldn't be going to them. It should be going to the infrastructure and replacing those pipes, because it makes the residents very reluctant to pay more and more every time a bond measure comes up, every time a tax increase comes up, sales tax. And the low-income people are the most impacted by that. But the money has to be kept with DWP for the infrastructure.
I'll just make a comment on that, just some information. Is that this October 1st, I believe, is the deadline for reporting from the various water purveyors to the state under a bill, I think it's SB 555, that requires reporting on water losses from systems, which would reflect the state of the infrastructure. And so just now there's starting to be sort of consistent set of reporting requirements, and that information should be available soon. We're hoping that we get it quickly and that we can incorporate it into this report card that we're writing. And so hopefully through that we can start educating people on what that's all about, and the website you can go to get more information in subsequent years, that type of thing. So that's a little piece of information related to that. Obviously, it doesn't solve the underlying problem.
Well, thank you, and thank you to our panelists. I think that we have many calls to action here, including principally on educating around the nexus between water health and women's health, and how to build these strategic partnerships between our physicians, our nurses, our health-based advocacy organizations, and those traditional water fields in engineering and science to do a better job of motivating and galvanizing community support. So thank you very much, and I know we're all here for questions, so thank you very much.